Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different. Usually, we take a book, we crack the spine, and we see what's inside. But today,
Yeah.
we are effectively walking into a war room.
Yeah. That's the only way to describe it.
If you are listening to this and you have been feeling like the world has gone completely sideways, like up is down, logic is hate speech, and masculinity is treated like a pathology, then the document we are breaking down today is going to feel like a breath of pure, unfiltered oxygen.
Or at least a very intense wake-up call, depending on where you stand.
Right, exactly. We are diving into turbo trauma, agenda, identity disturbance, and other BPD spectrum pathologies by Conrad Riker. And I want to say right off the bat, if you like what you hear today, please like and subscribe to the show because the algorithms definitely do not want this kind of conversation happening.
No, they don't. And let's be clear right from the jump here. This is not a polite sociological study. Riker frames this text as a manual for the red-pilled man, for the men's rights activist, or really just for any guy who feels like he's been sleepwalking through a nightmare designed to emasculate his intellect.
Now, we need to set a ground rule for this deep dive. Riker's book tackles highly politically charged content, left-wing, right-wing culture wars. It's all in there.
Oh yeah, it's heavy.
We are not taking any sides today. We are impartially reporting on the content provided. We are not endorsing Riker's viewpoints. We are simply trying to convey the ideas contained in this source material so you can make up your own mind.
Exactly. We're just the messengers unpacking the text. And Riker doesn't pull punches. He calls this book artillery for the mind. The basic premise is that we aren't dealing with a political difference of opinion anymore. We are dealing with a mass psychological breakdown.
He argues that the modern cultural narrative is a nightmare, and this book is the wake-up call.
It is a manifesto for the sovereignty of the individual. His background is interesting, too. He claims to have navigated the wreckage of the modern world, including his own relationships with borderline personalities, and he's returned with a very specific set of tools.
The Trivium, right?
Yeah, the ancient tools of the Trivium: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. He uses these to dismantle what he calls the emotional arguments of the lunatic left.
Before we even get into the weeds, I have to say this to you, the listener. If what we discussed today resonates with you, if you feel that click of recognition Riker is explicit that you need the full armory, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books immediately and buy this ebook.
Because what we are doing here is just giving you a reconnaissance briefing.
Right. The full text is the weapon you keep in your pocket. So go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books.
Okay.
And for ongoing battle updates, Riker tells readers to follow him on Substack at Conrad Riker.
That's at Conrad Riker. He posts daily there about this war against the narrative. But let's get into the core diagnosis, because this is where the book really sets itself apart.
Right, the diagnosis. Usually when we talk about woke culture or the left, people talk about ideology, Marxism, socialism, postmodernism. But Riker is throwing a curveball here.
A massive curveball. He says, sure, that's part of it, but the root cause isn't political, it's clinical.
He argues that modern leftist culture is a collective manifestation of borderline personality disorder, BPD.
He's taking a psychiatric diagnosis usually reserved for individuals and applying it to a massive cultural movement.
To understand this, we have to unpack what BPD actually is. Because I have to play devil's advocate here to remain impartial. Isn't that just rhetoric? Like, it's easy to call your opponents crazy. Is Riker just using BPD as an insult?
That's the crucial distinction he makes. He claims he is not using it as a slur. He's using it as a strict diagnostic framework. He relies heavily on the work of Otto Kernberg.
Kernberg is a titan in the field of psychoanalysis, right?
Huge. He studied borderline personality organization in depth, and Riker goes through the clinical criteria one by one and overlays them onto societal behavior.
So walk us through that map. If society is the patient, what are the symptoms?
The first and most obvious one, according to Riker, is identity disturbance. In a clinical setting, a BPD patient lacks a stable self. They feel a chronic sense of emptiness.
Because they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
They are constantly shape-shifting.
Exactly, latching onto external labels to fill the void.
Which explains the obsession with labels we see today.
Right, Riker argues that the modern activist doesn't have an identity rooted in character or competence or values, things that are internal and stable. Instead, they have an identity stack. I am a gender, a political affiliation, a victim status.
So the Cartesian self, the I think, therefore I am, is replaced by I identify as.
Precisely. And because those things are external, they are incredibly fragile. If I challenge your political opinion, I'm not just challenging an idea, I'm attacking your actual existence.
If your identity is I am a victim and someone says, actually, you're doing fine, They haven't just stated a fact, they have shattered your mirror.
And that fragility leads to the second criteria, which is splitting.
Splitting. It sounds like a horror movie title. What does it mean in this clinical context?
In psychoanalysis, splitting is a defense mechanism where a person views the world as all good or all bad. There is no nuance. There is no gray area. You are either an angel or a demon.
I see where this is going. The oppressor versus oppressed narrative.
It fits perfectly into his framework. Riker argues that the oppressor versus oppressed binary isn't sociology. It's a symptom of mental illness. It's a refusal to see complexity.
So if you are on their side, you are a saint no matter what you do.
Yeah.
If you disagree, you aren't just wrong.
Yeah.
You are evil. You are a fascist.
You are the enemy. It's like a toddler knocking over a block tower because one block is crooked. Yeah. They can't handle the imperfection, so they destroy the whole structure.
A toddler with institutional power. That's a scary thought.
Riker points out that the left cannot integrate the good and bad of Western civilization. They can't say, well, the West built incredible things like the scientific method and individual rights, but it also had severe flaws.
Their minds can't hold that tension.
Right, it causes cognitive dissonance. So to resolve the anxiety, they have to paint the West as all bad. It must be destroyed entirely.
And Riker uses a very specific, very weird example to illustrate this emotional fragility. The cry closet.
Oh man, the cry closet. You almost can't believe it's real, but it is.
Tell the listener what this is, because it genuinely sounds like a joke from a sitcom.
It is not a joke. Riker details an anecdote about the University of Utah installing a literal standalone booth in the library. It had plush carpeting and soundproofing.
And the purpose?
So students could go inside and weep during finals week.
On the surface, that's just pathetic. But Riker argues it represents a massive philosophical shift, right?
It represents the death of logos and the victory of pathos. Think about what a university was for the last 1,000 years. It was a place where you went to harden your mind.
You went there to have your ideas challenged.
To debate, to face the agony of thought. The library was a place of stoic silence and intense concentration.
And now, by installing a booth for weeping, the institution is signaling to the student, you are weak and your weakness is valid.
In fact, your weakness is so expected that we have built infrastructure to accommodate it. Riker calls this the shift from I think, therefore I am, to I feel, therefore you must change reality.
I feel, therefore you must change reality. That is a terrifying shift. Yeah. It puts the subjective emotion of the most unstable person in the driver's seat of society.
That is what he calls emotional tyranny. If someone claims they feel unsafe, that feeling overrides facts, due process, and logic. It's the heckler's veto, but pathologized.
And this brings us to the second major section of the book, which might be the most controversial part for some. But Riker insists it's the red pill truth, the biological imperative of deceit.
This is where we get into the evolutionary psychology.
And I want to slow down here, because this is the stuff that gets people banned from social media. Riker is arguing that men and women have fundamentally different biological strategies.
Right.
And that we've been lied to about them being the same.
Correct. Again, we're just reporting his thesis here. He breaks it down to the basics of survival and reproduction. He argues that the male strategy evolutionarily is overt.
Overt meaning direct.
Right. It's about aggression, competence, and resource acquisition. Men compete directly. If a man wants to dominate, he builds something or he fights.
And the female strategy.
Riker describes it as covert manipulation or social Machiavellianism. He argues that because women were physically smaller and more vulnerable throughout history, they didn't evolve to win through brute force.
Makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. If a woman dies in tribal warfare, the reproductive capacity of the tribe takes a massive hit.
So women evolved to be risk-averse regarding a physical danger, but high risk in social manipulation.
So gossip, reputation, destruction, social ostracization. These are the female equivalent of a spear.
Precisely. Riker argues that reputation destruction is the primary female weapon. And in the modern world where we don't throw spears anymore, the social weapon has become the dominant weapon.
A woman can't beat you in a fist fight, but she can destroy your career, your reputation, and your access to your children with a whisper campaign or a false accusation.
The weaponization of empathy, that's a key phrase he uses.
Let's drill down on this because he backs it up with neurological research on what he calls the crying hack. Now, I can hear skeptics saying, come on, crying is just an emotion. Is Riker saying there's something biologically distinct about female tears?
He claims it's hardwired neurology. He cites specific research regarding how the male brain responds to the sound and sight of female distress versus male distress.
That's a difference.
When a man sees another man crying, the brain registers it as a context-dependent event. It might elicit sympathy or it might elicit disgust, depending on the situation.
When a man sees a woman cry.
Specifically a woman of reproductive age, the research suggests it triggers a cortisol spike, which is stress followed immediately by an oxytocin flood if he moves to comfort her.
So his brain basically drugs them.
It overrides his threat detection. It effectively takes the logic module offline and engages the protector module. Riker argues this is an evolutionary adaptation.
Women needed a mechanism to stop male aggression instantly without fighting back. Tears are that mechanism. They are a biological circuit breaker.
Okay, that makes sense for survival in the Stone Age. If a woman is in trouble, you want the men to protect her. But Riker is arguing this has been weaponized now.
He calls it a Trojan horse. Because that same signal tears can be used offensively. In a conflict, if a woman starts crying, the man's defenses drop. He is biologically compelled to lower his shield, but in that moment she can strike.
This is the cry-bully concept.
Exactly. I am a victim, therefore I can destroy you. Riker argues that modern feminism has institutionalized this biological hack. The entire movement is effectively a global cry-bully tactic. We are oppressed victims, so give us power.
It explains the constant oscillation between I am a strong, independent woman who needs no man, and I am a victim of the patriarchy and need government protection.
It's that BPD, I hate you don't leave me dynamic, played out in politics. And Riker connects this to hypergamy.
Let's define hypergamy for the audience, just so we're all on the same page.
He defines hypergamy as the female drive for security and status. He argues that what we call female intuition is actually a hypervigilance to social cues, evolved to extract resources without physical risk.
It's about ensuring survival by aligning with the strongest or most resourceful provider.
And if that provider is the state,
Then they align with the state. That's his key point. Riker argues women have swapped the husband for the government. But to keep the government the new provider acting as the protector, they have to maintain the narrative of victimhood.
now you would think that psychology, the actual study of the mind, would understand these dynamics. But Riker takes direct aim at the American Psychological Association, the APA.
He looks at their recent guidelines on men and boys and sees a literal conspiracy.
The guidelines that talk about traditional masculinity being harmful, I remember when that came out, it caused a huge stir in the manosphere.
Riker dissects it ruthlessly. He calls it a manifesto to feminize men. The APA basically stated that traditional masculinity ideology is associated with negative outcomes.
They listed things like anti-femininity achievement, eschewing the appearance of weakness and adventure risk, and violence.
Achievement. Achievement is bad now, according to the APA.
In the context of the guidelines, it's framed as part of a harmful script. Riker argues this is the medicalization of male nature.
If you tell a boy that his desire to compete to win, to be strong, and to not cry when he gets hit is pathological, you are telling him that he is the disease.
It's gaslighting an entire gender. Your instincts are wrong. Be more like your sister.
That is a very apt analogy. And Riker argues this isn't accidental. This leads us right into the institutional capture. Section 3 of his book, he traces this back to the long march through the institutions.
This is the history lesson a lot of guys miss. They think this stuff just popped up on Twitter in 2016.
But Riker goes way back to the Frankfurt School. And I want to zoom in on Theodor Adorno here. Riker singles him out as the architect of a specific psychological weapon, the authoritarian personality.
Yes. You have to look at the context. This was the 1950s. The U.S. had just defeated fascism. Everyone agreed Nazis were bad. Adorno, being a Marxist, wanted to figure out how to frame American conservatism and traditional fatherhood as merely pre-fascism.
So his goal was to link the guy who goes to church and disciplines his kids directly to Hitler.
That was the literal goal. He created this F scale, the fascism scale, and he rigged the questions. If you believed in strict parenting, high F score.
If you believed in traditional gender roles, high F score.
If you respected authority, high F score.
So he pathologized normal masculine traits.
He turned the father into a villain. Before Adorno, the strict father was seen as a pillar of the community. He raised disciplined, strong sons.
After Adorno, the strict father was viewed with suspicion. Is he creating little fascists?
Riker argues this was the first major blow in the turbo trauma agenda. It severed the link between the protective father and the family.
And then Herbert Marcuse took it further. He argued for repressive tolerance.
Right, the idea that to create a truly tolerant society, you must be intolerant of the right and tolerant of the left. Riker says Marcuse is the grandfather of the deplatforming movement.
Critical theory, as Riker describes it, isn't about finding truth. It's about critique. It's about finding the cracks in the foundation and hammering a wedge into them until the building falls. It's a philosophy of pure destruction.
It's like acid. You pour it on the family, on religion, on logic, and you watch them dissolve.
And this is all part of the R strategy attempting to override the K strategy.
Okay, let's break down R strategy versus K strategy for the listener who might not be a biology buff. This is crucial for understanding the turbo trauma concept.
In evolutionary biology, an R strategy is about quantity over quality. Low investment parenting, high reproduction dependency on the environment. Think rabbits. They have a million babies, don't raise them and hope some survive.
And a K strategy.
It is high investment loyalty, truth planning for the future. Think wolves or humans traditionally. Riker argues Western civilization is a K-selected strategy. It requires discipline and high investment.
While the left, with its emphasis on dependency, free resources, and lack of consequences, is pushing an R-selected strategy.
Exactly. They're weaponizing pathological altruism to destroy the host civilization.
Pathological altruism is when you help someone to the point that it kills you, or when you help the other at the expense of your own tribe.
Riker argues we are being guilt-tripped into civilizational suicide, and nowhere is this war more visible than in the education system. This is the war on boys.
I have friends with sons, and they all say the exact same thing. School is a nightmare for boys right now.
Riker calls it the feminization of education. He argues that schools have pathologized normal male behavior. Rough play competition, fidgeting, drawing tanks. These are all treated as disciplinary issues now.
He tells that story about the finger gun suspension. A kid points his finger like a gun and gets suspended.
It's a projection of female anxiety onto male biology. The teachers, who are predominantly female, see a finger gun and hallucinate a school shooter.
They can't distinguish between play aggression and actual violence. And this leads to the ADHD epidemic. Riker has some pretty staggering numbers on this.
He cites CDC data showing boys are diagnosed at 2 to 3 times the rate of girls. But Riker goes a step further. He calls the medication Ritalin, Adderall chemical castration.
Whoa, that is a massive claim. How does he justify calling it that?
Look at the mechanism. Stimulants like Ritalin increase focus, yes, but they also suppress motor activity. They make you sit still. They blunt emotional extremes.
Riker argues that the school system is designed for the female brain. It emphasizes verbal communication, sitting still, compliance with authority, and consensus.
While the male brain, generally speaking, learns through movement competition and trial and error.
So when you put a boy in a girl's environment, he fails. Instead of changing the environment, we drug the boy.
We are breaking the thermometer because we don't like the temperature. We are medicating the masculinity out of them before they even hit puberty.
And then you add the curriculum on top of that, what he calls the curriculum of shame. Privilege walks, historical revisionism.
Riker argues this is designed to fracture a boy's identity. If you tell a white boy that his ancestors were villains and his natural ambition is toxic privilege, you induce learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness. That's a psychological term for when an animal is punished randomly no matter what it does. So it eventually just lays down and accepts the abuse.
It's psychological warfare on children. And if that boy grows up and tries to enter the legal system, he finds out the battlefield is even more tilted. Riker calls this the gynocentric conspiracy of silence regarding domestic violence.
This is a crucial section of the book. He brings up Erin Peatsy. She founded the first women's shelter in the world in the UK. She is the mother of the modern shelter movement.
But she was ostracized, banned, and threatened. Why? Because she stated, based on her own data, that domestic violence is bilateral.
Meaning women are just as violent as men?
Exactly. And often the violence is reciprocal. But that didn't fit the narrative, so they erased her. Instead, we got the Duluth model.
This is the framework used by police departments almost everywhere, right? It explicitly frames all domestic violence as patriarchal terrorism.
Wait, explain how the Duluth model works on the ground for the audience. If the cops show up to a house, what does the model tell them to do?
The model dictates that they must identify the primary aggressor. But the training implies the man is always the dominant aggressor because he has male privilege.
Even if he is the one bleeding. Even if she is the one holding the knife. Riker cites anecdotes of men being arrested while bleeding because, quote, she is smaller or you could have left.
It ignores reality to preserve the ideology.
Riker points to the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case as the definitive forensic exposition of this.
That trial was a cultural earthquake for the manosphere.
Riker analyzes it as a case study in female-coded rage. He talks about DARVO, deny attack and reverse victim and offender.
It's a manipulation tactic where the abuser claims to be the victim. Amber Heard was on tape admitting to hitting him, yet she played the victim.
And yet there were men defending her. Riker calls them white knights.
This is the white knight pathology. Riker argues these men are driven by that biological imperative we talked about earlier to protect women, even when the woman is the aggressor.
Even when the evidence is staring them in the face, their biology overrides their logic. They're simping for an abuser because their programming tells them woman equals victim.
She literally said on tape, tell the world, Johnny Depp, a man, am a victim of domestic violence, and see how many people believe you.
That quote is the smoking gun of the turbo trauma agenda. She was banking on the gynocentric conspiracy of silence. She believed that her status as a woman trumped his status as a victim.
And Title IX campus tribunals operate on the exact same premise. Riker describes university hearings as star chambers, where due process is inverted, and the believe all women mantra completely replaces evidence.
It's terrifying. And it moves us into what Riker considers the ultimate form of identity disturbance, the transgender phenomenon. Now, Riker's take on this is very consistent with his overall BPD thesis.
He focuses heavily on ROGD, rapid onset gender dysphoria. He cites Lisa Littman's research, which suggests that for many teenage girls, this is a social contagion. It spreads through peer groups like a trend.
But Riker connects it to the mothers, which was a totally new angle for me. Munchausen by proxy.
Yes, he argues that in many cases this is Munchausen by proxy on a societal level. Munchausen by proxy is when a caregiver makes a child sick to get sympathy.
Riker argues that modern trans moms are doing a social version of this. Mothers gain social currency, they gain status in the woke hierarchy by having a trans child. It makes them the ultimate ally. They get to be the martyr and the saint.
So the child's identity becomes a prop for the mother's ego.
That is his argument. And for the kids themselves, Riker sees the trans identity as a shell. Remember, we talked about identity disturbance.
If a kid has no stable self, no sense of who they are, and they are suffering from trauma, or maybe they are on the autism spectrum, which Riker notes is very common in this cohort, the trans label offers a rigid, pre-packaged identity.
It's a crab finding a shell because it's too soft to survive the ocean.
A hard, prefabricated shell. It comes with a flag, a community, a set of enemies, and a strict script. I am trans. Suddenly, you aren't just a confused, lonely kid. You are a generic warrior for civil rights.
And Riker says demanding society affirm this is a failure of reality testing on a civilizational scale.
It's the ultimate gaslighting. To demand that the world accept a biological impossibility is to break the world's connection to truth. It is, I feel, therefore you must change reality, taken to its absolute limit.
We're well into the deep end here, and I want to remind everyone listening, if your blood is boiling either in agreement or shock, you really need to read the source material.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and get Turbo Trauma Agenda. We are just skimming the surface of the data Riker presents. You need to see the citations yourself.
And follow Conrad Dreiker on Substack. He breaks down the daily news cycle using these exact frameworks. It's like having a decoder ring for the headlines.
We haven't even touched on the dating market yet. Section 7, sexual market value and the wall. This is the stuff that usually gets people canceled, but Riker puts it in stark economic terms.
He uses the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. Data from Tinder and OkCupid shows that the top 20% of men are getting 80% of the female attention. Women are hyper-selecting for the top tier.
Which leaves the bottom 80% of men fighting for scraps. And the average woman thinking she deserves a top-tier man because she can get a match with one.
She can get a match, but she can't get a commitment. That's the disconnect. Riker talks about the divergence of value over time. It's cruel math. Male value tends to accrue like compound interest.
As a man gets older, if he works hard, he gains status, resources, confidence. His value goes up.
And female value.
Riker argues it depreciates because it is tied more heavily to biological markers of fertility, youth, and beauty. He says it's not sexism, it's evolution. Men like what they like.
This leads to what he calls the epiphany phase. This is women in their 30s who spent their 20s prioritizing careers and riding the carousel, his words, only to realize that the high-status men they want are now looking at 23-year-olds.
He quotes Schopenhauer here, on women.
He does. He discusses Schopenhauer's view that women prioritize the immediate and emotional over the abstract and future-oriented. Riker argues this is why they hit the wall so hard. They didn't plan for the winter during the summer of their youth.
And he mentions the neurochemical cost of promiscuity, oxytocin burnout.
The claim is that high partner counts destroy the neurochemical ability to pair bond. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. Riker argues that if you bond and break dozens of times, you eventually fry the receptor.
You become incapable of forming a deep, lasting connection. You become a ghost in your own relationships.
That is a bleak picture. It sounds like the West is just done. The family is destroyed, the schools are indoctrination camps, and the dating market is a disaster.
But Riker doesn't just leave us in the wreckage. He offers a strategy. He calls it reclaiming the Iron Citadel.
This is the white pill at the end of the red pill overdose. It starts with the trivium. We have to reclaim the tools of thought, grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
Grammar is about defining words. We have to stop semantic drift. We have to stop letting them redefine equality to mean equity. We have to hold the line on definitions.
Can you give an example of using grammar as a weapon like he suggests?
Sure. Riker says when someone says diversity is our strength, you use grammar to ask, define diversity. Do you mean diversity of thought? Or diversity of skin color? And define strength. Does it mean social cohesion? Or does it mean lack of conflict?
By forcing the definition, you expose the emptiness of the slogan. Usually diversity just means fewer white men and strength means nothing.
You pop the balloon, and logic. He emphasizes learning the fallacies, disarming emotional fallacies like the appeal to pity. When they show you a picture of a sad child to justify a policy that will destroy the economy, you have to be able to say that is sad, but the policy's still wrong.
That takes courage. It takes the ability to be called heartless.
Riker says you have to accept that you will be called names. Racist, sexist, transphobe. These are just control words. They are shot callers. If you flinch, they win.
If you say, I don't care what you call me, the facts are the facts, they lose their power. That is the gray rock method.
Be a gray rock. Tactical advice from the book on dealing with leftist hysteria.
This is actually a technique used for dealing with narcissists. You become as boring and immovable as a gray rock. When they scream, you don't scream back. When they cry, you don't apologize.
You just stand there. You do not negotiate. You do not explain. You simply exist in the truth.
Become boring and immovable. It denies them the emotional fuel they crave.
Leftist hysteria feeds on reaction. If you don't react, they starve. Riker also calls for a rejection of pathological altruism and what he calls toxic femininity.
We hear so much about toxic masculinity. It's refreshing to hear someone flip the script for that audience. He argues toxic femininity is the weaponization of weakness to control strength.
The solution, Riker says, is to return to the Western canon. Read Homer, read Dante, read the great books that built the masculine mind. Detox your brain.
And finally, the most important mandate. Go forth and multiply.
It's a demographic battle. Riker says you can't just complain. You have to outcompete and outbreed the ideology. Ideologies that don't reproduce die out.
Liberals have very low birth rates. Conservatives and religious people have high birth rates.
So time is on the side of the case strategist.
If they can hold the line, if they can protect their children from the mind virus in the schools, that's why Riker is so big on the Western canon. He says you have to inoculate your kids with Homer, with Shakespeare, with the Bible.
You have to give them a soul that is too dense for the identity disturbance to penetrate. Build a fortress from the inside out.
The Iron Citadel is your mind.
This has been a massive deep dive. We've covered so much ground. I want to reiterate Riker's call to action here. He's not just selling a book. He's trying to build an army of the mind.
He wants you to leave a 5-star review to spite the censors. He knows this book is going to be targeted. He knows the algorithm will try to bury it. So he's asking for guerrilla warfare from his readers.
Oh, do it. Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books. Buy Turbo Trauma Agenda. Read it. Underscore it. Use the arguments at the dinner table. Use them in the boardroom. And like and subscribe to our show so we can keep bringing you these deep dives.
And don't forget the Substack. Conrad Riker. The news cycle moves fast, and Riker is analyzing it in real time. If you want to see how the BPD diagnosis applies to the headline of the day, that's where you go.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. If society is suffering from borderline personality disorder, as Riker claims, think about how social media algorithms are acting as the ultimate enablers. They literally profit by triggering our identity disturbances and rewarding us for splitting the world into extreme good and evil.
Wow, we might just be living in a digital psychiatric ward that monetizes our symptoms.
Exactly. Something to think about. Riker says we are standing at the precipice. We can either fall into the age of feeling, which is really the age of chaos, or we can stand firm in the logos.
The choice is between the cry closet and the Iron Citadel. I know which one I'm choosing.
Me too. Stand tall in the logos, everyone. We'll
Yeah.
see you on the next deep dive.